There is a name buried in the 4th chapter of Genesis. A single name attached to a single woman, dropped into the text without explanation, and then abandoned. The genealogies of the ancient world were lists of men, fathers and sons, patriarchs and heirs. Women were rarely recorded, rarely named, rarely remembered. And yet here, in the line of Cain, the line that Scripture seems eager to leave behind, one woman breaks the surface. Her brother forges bronze and iron. Her father boasts of murder. And she appears for the length of half a sentence, named but unexplained, Naamah. That is all the Bible gives us. One word, one verse, and then silence. But the silence did not last. For the rabbis who pored over these texts, for the mystics who believed every letter concealed an ocean, that single name became a doorway. And what they found on the other side of it would split into 2 stories so opposite, so impossible to reconcile, that they could not both be true. In one tradition, Naamah is a woman of such purity that she becomes the wife of Noah, the mother of all who survived the flood, the grandmother of every human being alive today. In another, she is not human at all. She is a queen of demons, a seductress who haunts the dreams of men, the mother of plagues and unclean spirits, ruling beside Lilith in the darkness beneath the world. The same name, the same verse. 2 beings as far apart as heaven and the abyss. By the end of this journey, you will understand how one forgotten woman became both the salvation of the human race and the mother of its torments. You will see how ancient interpreters read the same handful of Hebrew letters and arrived at salvation and damnation. And you will discover why her story, more than almost any other, reveals the strange and beautiful way the ancient mind filled the silences that Scripture left behind. If you find yourself drawn to the hidden corners of these ancient texts, to the figures who hover at the edges of the sacred story, consider subscribing and tell us in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight. It means more than you know to gather these scattered listeners from every corner of the earth. So light is fading, the day is closing, and the old texts are waiting. Let us begin, shall we? To understand Naamah, we must first return to the beginning, not the beginning of the world, but the beginning of the broken world, the world after the garden. Imagine the earth in its earliest days, after the gates of Eden had closed. The soil still remembered the feet of the first humans, the rivers still ran from that lost place. And somewhere east of the garden, in the land called Nod, the land of wandering, the first exile built the first city. His name was Cain. Scripture tells us that Cain, the firstborn of Adam and Eve, rose up against his brother Abel and killed him in a field. It was the first murder, the first time human blood soaked into the ground. And God set a mark upon Cain, a sign of both judgment and strange protection, and sent him out from the presence of the Lord to wander the earth. But Cain did not wander forever. The text records that he settled, that he knew his wife, that she bore a son named Enoch, and Cain built a city and named it after that son. From that city descended a line of men whose names the Bible preserves with peculiar care: Irad, Mehujael, Methushael, and then Lamech. Lamech is the 7th from Adam through the line of Cain, and he is the first man in Scripture recorded to take 2 wives. Their names were Ada and Zillah. And here, in the household of Lamech, the human story takes a turn that the ancient interpreters would never forget. Lamech speaks, and what he says is terrible. He gathers his 2 wives and declares to them words that echo down through the centuries. He says that he has killed a man for wounding him, a young man for striking him. And then he makes a boast that twists the mark of Cain into something monstrous. If Cain is avenged 7-fold, Lamech declares, then Lamech will be avenged 77-fold. It is a song of violence, a poem of vengeance. The first recorded verse in human history, and it celebrates killing, The descendants of Cain, it seems, had not softened across the generations. They had hardened. The exile had not humbled them. It had armed them. And it is precisely here, in this household of 2 wives and a murderous song, that the Bible names its forgotten woman. The sons of Adar were Jabal, the father of those who dwell in tents and keep livestock, and Jubal, the father of all who play the harp and the flute. The sons of Zillah included Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. And then, almost as an afterthought, the text adds 5 quiet words. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. That is the verse. Genesis chapter 4, verse 22. She is named as the sister of the great metalworker, the daughter of Lamech and Zillah, and nothing more is said. No husband, no children, no deeds, no death. She is simply there, and then she is gone, swallowed by the genealogy that rushes forward towards Seth and the line of promise. Stop for a moment and consider how strange this is. In the entire genealogy of Cain, across 7 generations of men, Naamah is the only woman named for her own sake. Adar and Zillah are named, yes, but only as the wives of Lamech, defined by their relationship to a man. Naamah stands differently. She is named in the same breath as her brothers, listed among the founders of civilization. Her brothers gave the world music, herding, and metalwork. And she, the text seems to suggest, gave the world something too. But it does not tell us what. The ancient mind could not let this rest. For if the genealogies recorded only what mattered, only the names that carried weight, then why preserve Naamah? Why give her a place beside the inventors of the harp and the forge? The biblical authors, the rabbis reasoned, did nothing by accident. Every name was a seed, and a name planted in silence was a name waiting to be understood. So they asked the question that would generate 1,000 years of speculation. Who was Naamah, and why does the Torah remember her? In the ancient world, a name was never merely a label. A name was a destiny. A name was a window into the soul of the one who bore it. And so, when the interpreters approached Naamah, they began where they always began, with the name itself. In Hebrew, the name Naamah comes from a root that means pleasant, lovely, sweet, agreeable. The same root gives us words for grace and delight and the kind of beauty that pleases. To be named Naamah was to be named loveliness itself, pleasantness given a human form. And immediately the interpreters divided. For a name like this could be read 2 ways, and the 2 readings led to opposite worlds. One school of thought heard in the name a description of inner virtue. Naamah was pleasant because her deeds were pleasant. She was lovely because her soul was lovely. In a line descended from a murderer, in a household ruled by a man who sang of vengeance. Here was a woman whose very name testified to goodness, a light in the darkness of Cain's line. Perhaps, they reasoned, she was named Naamah because her conduct was pleasing to God, a righteous woman preserved in an unrighteous family, the way a single flower might grow from poisoned ground. But another school heard something else entirely. They noted the company she kept in the text. Her brother Jubal invented instruments of music, and music, to certain ancient interpreters, was not innocent. It was the art of seduction, the sound that lured hearts away from heaven. Her brother Tubal-Cain forged weapons of bronze and iron, the tools of war and killing. This was a family of dangerous gifts, of beauty turned to corruption, and in such a family, a woman named Loveliness might be lovely in the most dangerous way of all, pleasant not to God, but to men, beautiful, not as virtue, but as temptation. One ancient Jewish tradition, preserved in the rabbinic commentary on Genesis, captures the division precisely. Naamah, it records, was so called because she sang pleasant songs to the sound of the timbrel in honor of idols. In this reading, she was a temptress of the old world, using the inventions of her family, the music of Jubal, to draw people into idolatry. Her loveliness was a snare. And yet that same body of tradition preserves the opposite view. For another rabbinic voice insists that Naamah was the wife of Noah, the very Noah who would build the ark, who would survive the flood, who would become the second father of all humanity. In this reading, Naamah was not a temptress, but a saint, not a snare, but a refuge, the mother of the new world. Here, already, at the very threshold of her story, we encounter the great mystery of Naamah. She is loveliness. But loveliness toward what end? Loveliness in service of heaven, or loveliness in service of the deep? The Bible will not answer. It has given us a name and nothing more. And into that silence, the ancient interpreters poured everything they feared and everything they hoped about the nature of beauty, the danger of desire, and the thin line between the woman who saves and the woman who destroys. To follow her story, we must follow both paths, and we will begin with the brighter one, the path that leads to the ark. Before we go further into the shadows, let us return to the household where Naamah was born, and dwell there longer than the text invites us to. For the family of Lamech is one of the most fascinating and least examined households in all of Scripture, and to understand Naamah, we must understand the world that shaped her. The line of Cain, as Genesis records it, was not a line of shepherds and worshippers. It was a line of builders. Cain himself, the first murderer, was also the first to build a city. Think about what that means. The man marked by God for the shedding of blood became the founder of urban civilization, the first to gather human beings together behind walls. There is a deep ambivalence here that the ancient interpreters did not miss. The city is the great achievement of human cooperation. It is also, in the biblical imagination, often a place of pride and corruption, from Babel to Sodom to the great cities of the prophets. And it begins with Cain. From Cain's city descended the Inventors. And here the text grows specific in a way that is genuinely remarkable for an ancient genealogy. It does not simply list names. It tells us what these men gave to the world. Jabal, the son of Adah, was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. He was, in other words, the originator of the nomadic, pastoral way of life, the herder, the keeper of flocks who moves with the seasons. An entire mode of human existence traced back to a single name. Jubal, his brother, was the father of all who play the harp and the flute. He was the inventor of music. Consider the weight of that. Every melody ever sung, every instrument ever played, every symphony and every lullaby, traced in this ancient text back to one man in the line of Cain. Music, that most mysterious of human arts, the thing that can move us to tears or to ecstasy without a single word, born in the household of the cursed line. And Tubal-Cain, the son of Zillah, was an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. He was the first metalworker, the father of the forge. From him came the plough and the blade, the tool and the weapon. The mastery of metal is, in a sense, the foundation of all later technology. The ability to take the ore from the ground, to heat it, to shape it, to make from the raw earth instruments of human will. And it begins with Tubal-Cain. Now here is the pattern that the ancient interpreters noticed, and that troubled them. Each of these inventions is double-edged. The herding of Jabal feeds the world, but it was a dispute over offerings, the offerings of a herder and a farmer, that led to the first murder. The music of Jubal can lift the soul toward heaven, but it can also be the soundtrack of seduction and idolatry, as the darker reading of Naamah suggests. And the metalwork of Tubal-Cain can forge the plough that feeds, but it can also forge the sword that kills. Indeed, the very next thing we hear in the text, immediately after Tubal-Cain is named, is Lamech's song of murder, his boast of killing a man, perhaps with the very weapons his son had learned to make. The gifts of Cain's line, in other words, were powers, and powers can be turned toward life or toward death. The line that gave the world herding, music, and metalwork was also the line of the first murderer and the vengeful Lamech. Genius and violence grew on the same tree. And into this household, this house of dangerous gifts, Naamah was born, the sister of the metalworker, the daughter of the man who sang of vengeance. And her name, alone among all the inventions, is not explained. Her brothers gave herding, music, metal, and she gave. The text seems to hint by placing her among them. Something. But what? This is why the interpreters could not let her rest. She is named in the catalogue of the founders of civilization, the only woman so named, and yet her contribution is left blank. The silence around her is not the ordinary silence that surrounds the countless unnamed women of Scripture. It is a pointed silence, a silence with a frame around it, a blank space in a list of achievements. And the ancient mind, abhorring such a vacuum, rushed to fill it. Those who read her darkly filled the blank with seduction. If her brothers gave the tools and the music, then Naamah, the lovely one, gave the allurement. She took Jubal's music and made it the music of temptation. She took the beauty of the human form and made it a snare. Her invention, in this reading, was the art of seduction itself, the weaponizing of loveliness, the very art that the book of Enoch says the fallen angel Azazel taught to women. Naamah became, in the dark imagination, the first great seductress, the mother of the arts that draw the heart away from heaven. Those who read her brightly filled the blank differently. If her brothers gave the outward arts of civilization, then perhaps Naamah gave something inward, goodness, righteousness, the preservation of virtue in a corrupt line. Her contribution, in this reading, was her character itself, the deeds pleasing to God that earned her a place in the ark. She was the one good thing the line of Cain produced before it drowned, the single thread of light that God reached down to save. Either way, the family explains the daughter. The house of dangerous gifts produced a daughter of dangerous beauty. And whether that beauty was turned toward salvation or toward ruin became the question that split her story in two. We should linger, too, on her father. For Lamech is one of the most chilling figures in the early chapters of Genesis, and his shadow falls across his daughter. Lamech, seventh in the line of Cain, is the first polygamist named in Scripture, the first man recorded to take two wives, Adah and Zillah. And he is the author of the first poem, the first piece of recorded verse in human history. We might expect the first poem to be a song of praise, a hymn to the Creator, a celebration of love, or of the beauty of the world. It is none of these things. It is a song of murder. He gathers his wives, Adah and Zillah, and commands them to listen. And he tells them, in the compressed and brutal language of ancient poetry, that he has slain a man for wounding him, a young man for striking him. And then he makes his terrible boast. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, he declares, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Reflect on what this means. God had placed a mark on Cain, and with it a warning that anyone who killed Cain would suffer vengeance sevenfold. It was a strange mercy, a protection extended even to the first murderer. But Lamech takes this divine warning and twists it into a boast of his own ferocity. He claims for himself a vengeance more than 10 times greater than the protection God gave to Cain. He has taken the language of divine mercy and turned it into a celebration of human violence. Where God said sevenfold as a restraint, Lamech says 77-fold as a threat. This is the moral trajectory of Cain's line, captured in a single poem. From Cain's murder, committed in a moment of passion and then deeply regretted, marked by God's strange protection, to Lamech's murder, committed and then boasted of, celebrated in verse, multiplied in pride. The line had not learned humility from its founder's crime. It had grown bolder in violence. The mark of Cain, once a sign of judgment and mercy, had become in Lamech's mouth a banner of arrogance. And it is in the very next breath, immediately after this song of murderous pride, that the text names the children of Lamech, including Naamah. She is born into the household of the man who sang the world's first song, and that song was a hymn to vengeance. Her brother Tubal Cain forged the metal. Perhaps, the ancient imagination wondered, he forged the very weapon his father boasted of using. And Naamah grew up in this house of beautiful and terrible gifts, of music and metal and murder. Is it any wonder that her story split in two? The daughter of such a house could be imagined either as the one who escaped its darkness, the good seed preserved from the poisoned ground, or, as its culmination, the final and most dangerous flower of a line that had perfected the art of turning gifts toward ruin. The house of Lamech could produce a saint by way of contrast and rescue, or a demon queen by way of inheritance and intensification. And the tradition, unable to choose, produced both. Let us widen our gaze now from the household to the whole world of that age, the antediluvian world, the world before the flood. For the ancient texts and traditions imagined this lost world in vivid detail, and Naamah lived in the last days of it. It was, by all accounts, a world of giants and wonders and deepening corruption. The lifespans were enormous, the texts record, men living 700, 800, 900 years and more. Methuselah, the longest lived of all, is said to have reached 969 years. We will not pause to debate how such numbers should be understood, whether literally or symbolically, or as echoes of ancient ways of reckoning. What matters for our story is the picture they paint, a picture of a world utterly unlike our own, a world of vast ages and slow generations, where a single human life might span what for us would be a dozen lifetimes. In this long-lived world, knowledge accumulated. The arts of Jabal and Jubal and Tubal Cain spread and developed across centuries. Cities grew, and, the traditions hold, corruption grew with them. The forbidden knowledge, brought down by the Watchers, the secrets of weaponry and sorcery and allurement, spread through the human population. The giants, the offspring of the angelic descent, walked among men, and their violence filled the earth. The Book of Enoch paints the corruption in stark colors. The giants consumed everything. They turned against humanity. The forbidden arts unleashed bloodshed and oppression, and the perversion of the natural order. The earth itself, the text says, was filled with violence, and it cried out under the weight of the wickedness it was forced to bear. The very ground, soaked with innocent blood, lifted its voice to heaven. This is the world Naamah knew, a world of wonders and horrors intertwined, a world where the gifts of civilization had reached extraordinary heights and the corruption of the human heart had sunk to extraordinary depths, a world of music and metal and beauty, and also of giants and violence and the slow poisoning of all things, a world ripe in the moral logic of the ancient texts for judgment. And somewhere in that world, in the house of Lamech, lived a woman whose name meant pleasant, whether she was a point of light in the gathering darkness or one of the agents of the darkness itself. She lived in the last days of the old world, and she would be there, one way or another, when it ended. The brighter tradition places her in the ark, riding out the judgment. The darker tradition places her among those who summoned it, her beauty among the lures that drew the angels down. But both traditions agree on this. Naamah belonged to the final generation of the antediluvian world, the generation that would see the fountains of the deep break open and the windows of heaven pour out the end of all things. She was a woman of the world's last days, and that, perhaps, is part of why her story carries such weight. To stand at the end of a world, to be among the last of an age, is to bear a particular kind of significance. The final flower of a dying line, the last daughter of a drowning world. Whether saint or seductress, Naamah is forever associated with endings, with the closing of an age, with the moment when an entire world passed away beneath the waters and only a remnant survived to begin again. The Bible tells us that Noah had a wife. It tells us this plainly. When the waters rose and the world drowned, 8 souls passed through the flood inside the ark. Noah and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And alongside them 4 women, the wives, Noah's wife and the wives of his 3 sons. But here is the strange thing. The Bible never names a single one of them. 4 women, 4 mothers of the entire human race that would follow. Every person who has ever lived since the flood, every king and every beggar, every nation across every continent descends from these 4 unnamed women. And yet Scripture, which records the names of so many forgotten men, leaves these mothers in shadow. To the ancient interpreters, this was unbearable. How could the mother of all the living, the woman who repopulated the earth, go unnamed? Surely her name was hidden somewhere in the text. Surely it could be recovered. And so they searched. And in their searching, many of them arrived at the same answer. Her name was Naamah. The reasoning ran like this. The Torah names very few women. When it does name a woman, it does so for a reason. Naamah is named in the generations just before the flood, in the line that leads down toward the days of Noah. She appears, is named, and then vanishes from the narrative precisely at the point where the world tips toward destruction. Where did she go? What became of her? The interpreters answered. She did not vanish. She entered the ark. The reason the Torah preserved her name, when it named almost no other woman of that age, was to tell us quietly who the mother of the new world would be. Naamah, the lovely one, the daughter of Lamech, became the wife of Noah and the mother of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The great rabbinic commentary on Genesis states it directly. Naamah, it says, was the wife of Noah, and it explains the name in the brightest possible light. She was called Naamah, pleasant, because her deeds were pleasing to God. Consider what this would mean. It would mean that the salvation of humanity passed through the line of Cain after all. We tend to imagine that Cain's line ended in the flood, washed away with all its violence and corruption, and that only the line of Seth, the righteous line, continued. But this tradition suggests something far more subtle and far more beautiful. It suggests that from the darkest family in the ancient world, the family of the first murderer, the family of the vengeful Lamech, God drew out one woman of surpassing goodness, and through her, he preserved the entire human race. The line of the murderer and the line of the promise joined in the ark, Cain's blood and Seth's blood flowing together into every generation that followed. If this tradition is true, then we are all the children of Naamah. The loveliness in the line of Cain did not drown. It survived. It became our mother. There is a tenderness in this reading that is easy to miss. The ancient world was harsh toward the descendants of Cain. They were the cursed line, the doomed branch, the family marked for destruction. And yet here, the rabbis reached into that cursed line and found something worth saving. They refused to believe that an entire family could be wholly lost. Even in the house of Lamech, even beside the forge and the war songs, goodness could grow, and God would not let it perish. But not every interpreter agreed, for there was a problem. If Naamah was so good, so pleasing to God that she became the mother of the new world, then why did the Torah place her in the line of Cain at all? Why not in the line of Seth, the line of the righteous? And why surround her with brothers whose inventions, music, and weapons were so often associated with corruption? Some rabbis, troubled by this, offered a different reading of the very same woman. They agreed that Naamah was the wife of Noah, but they disagreed about her character. According to this tradition, she was called Naamah not because her deeds were pleasant to God, but because her deeds were pleasant to herself, pleasant in the way of sin and idolatry. In this darker reading, even the wife of Noah, even the mother of the human race, carried a shadow. She drummed and sang to idols. And when she entered the ark, she may have carried something of the old world's corruption with her, a seed that would sprout again in her descendants. This is a remarkable thing to notice. Even in the tradition that makes Naamah the mother of all the living, the interpreters could not fully cleanse her. The name Naamah, loveliness, refused to sit still. It kept sliding toward seduction. And so within a single identity, the wife of Noah, we already find the war between the two Naamahs beginning, the saint and the seductress, contending for the same woman. Why does this matter? Because it reveals something about how the ancient mind understood human nature. They did not believe in simple people. They did not believe that anyone, not even the mother of the saved world, was purely light or purely dark. Even the woman in the ark carried both. And that complexity, that refusal to flatten a human soul into a single color, is part of what makes these old readings so enduringly powerful. But before we turn to the darker story, we must understand just how high the bright tradition reaches. For if Naamah was indeed the wife of Noah, then her place in the human story is greater than we have yet grasped. Let us dwell longer in the bright tradition, for it has depths we have not yet plumbed. If Naamah was indeed the wife of Noah, then she was one of 4 women who carried the entire future of humanity through the waters. And the ancient interpreters thought carefully about these 4 mothers, for upon them rested everything. 8 souls entered the ark, Noah and his wife and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their 3 wives. From these 8, and specifically from the 4 couples, the entire human race would descend. After the flood, the genealogies of Genesis fan out from the 3 sons of Noah into all the nations of the earth. The Table of Nations in the 10th chapter of Genesis traces the peoples of the ancient world back to Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and through them to Noah and his wife. Every nation, every language, every people in the biblical account flows from this single family preserved in the ark. And so the 4 women in the ark are, in the most literal sense the tradition allows, the mothers of all humanity, the wife of Noah, the mother of the 3 sons, and the 3 wives of the sons, the mothers of the branching nations. The whole human family tree, in the biblical imagination, has these 4 women at its root. It is striking, then, that Scripture names none of them. The men are named generation after generation, but the 4 mothers of the new humanity are left in silence. And it was into this silence, as we have seen, that the tradition poured the name of Naamah for the wife of Noah. The interpreters could not bear that the mother of all the living should go unnamed, and so they recovered her name, they believed, from the genealogy of Cain, where the lovely Naamah waited, named but unexplained, ready to be identified as the Great Mother. There is a beautiful theological logic in making Naamah, of Cain's line, the wife of Noah, of Seth's line, for it would mean that the 2 great branches of early humanity, the line of the cursed first murderer and the line of the appointed successor, were joined in the ark. Noah descended through Seth, the son God gave to Adam and Eve in place of slain Abel, the line of the faithful. Naamah, if the tradition is right, descended through Cain, the line of exile and invention and violence. And in their marriage, the 2 lines became one. The blood of Cain and the blood of Seth flowed together into Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and from them into all of us. This means that humanity after the flood is not descended from Seth alone, the righteous line, but from both lines joined. We carry within us, in this reading, the inheritance of both Cain and Seth, the capacity for invention and for violence that marked Cain's line, and the capacity for faithfulness that marked Seth's line. We are the children of the murderer and the children of the faithful, both at once, joined in the persons of Noah and Naamah. And perhaps this, too, is a kind of wisdom, an acknowledgement that human nature is mixed at its very root, that we inherit both light and shadow, both the gifts and the dangers of our ancestors. The ancient interpreters saw in the ark and the flood not merely a story of destruction and survival, but a profound echo of the creation itself. The flood was an uncreation, a return to the watery chaos of the beginning, and the emergence from the ark was a new creation, a fresh beginning, a second Genesis. Consider the parallels, which the ancient readers noticed and treasured. At the first creation, the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters, and God brought forth dry land from the deep. After the flood, God sent a wind, a breath, a spirit, over the waters, and the dry land emerged again. At the first creation, God made the animals and the birds and brought them forth upon the earth. After the flood, the animals and the birds came forth from the ark to repopulate the world. At the first creation, God blessed humanity and commanded them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. After the flood, God blessed Noah and his sons with the very same words, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." The new world was a deliberate recapitulation of the first. Creation begun again. And in this second creation, the four women played the role that Eve had played in the first. Eve was the mother of all living, the text says, the woman from whom all humanity descended in the first world. And the four women of the ark, and especially Naamah, the wife of Noah, in the bright tradition, became the mothers of all living in the second world, the renewed humanity. Naamah, in this reading, is a second Eve, the mother of the human race reborn, the woman at the head of the new creation, as Eve stood at the head of the first. There is something deeply moving in this parallel. Eve's name means life, or living, the mother of all who live. Naamah's name means pleasant, lovely. And if Naamah is the second Eve, then the second mother of humanity is named not for life, but for loveliness, for pleasantness, for the sweetness that pleases. It is as if the tradition wished to say that the renewed world, the world after the cleansing waters, was founded upon loveliness, upon a mother whose very name was a benediction. The first creation rested upon life. The second creation, in this beautiful reading, rested upon loveliness. And yet, as always with Naamah, the shadow is never far. For the same loveliness that founds the new world in the bright tradition is the loveliness that helped to ruin the old world in the dark tradition. The second Eve and the demon queen share a name. The mother of the reborn humanity and the seductress who drew down the angels are called by the same word. Even at the height of the bright tradition, where Naamah stands as the second Eve at the head of the new creation, we cannot quite forget the other Naamah, the queen of the night, whose loveliness was a snare. The two are bound together by their name, and the name will not let either one be forgotten. Let us follow the bright Naamah forward, past the ark, into the world she helped to people. For if she was the wife of Noah, then her descendants are not an abstraction. They are the named peoples of the ancient world, traced in detail through the genealogies of Genesis. Her son, Japheth, the tradition holds, became the ancestor of the peoples to the north and west, the maritime nations, the distant coastlands. Her son Ham became the ancestor of the peoples to the south of Egypt and Cush and the lands of Africa, and also, in the biblical account, of Canaan and the peoples of the land that Israel would later enter. Her son Shem became the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, and through Shem the line would run down to Abraham, to Isaac and Jacob, to the people of Israel, and ultimately, in the Christian reading, to the Messiah himself. Consider, then, the staggering scope of Naamah's motherhood in the bright tradition. If she was the wife of Noah, then she is the grandmother, not of one people, but of all peoples. The nations of the north and the nations of the south, the peoples of the sea and the peoples of the desert, all of them, in the biblical imagination, descend from her sons. She is the common ancestor, the shared grandmother, the woman in whom all the divided nations of the earth find a single root, and the line of promise runs through her too. For Abraham, the father of the faithful, descends from Shem, who descends from Noah and his wife. If that wife was Naamah, then Naamah is the ancestress of Abraham and of the whole people of Israel, and of all who would later be grafted into that promise. The line that leads to the patriarchs, to the prophets, to the kings of Israel, to the long story of God's dealings with his chosen people, runs back through the genealogies to the woman in the ark. And if the tradition is right, that woman was Naamah, the lovely one from the line of Cain. There is a vast and humbling vision here. The whole of human history, in the biblical account, the rise and fall of nations, the long story of faith and rebellion, the line of promise winding down through the generations toward redemption, all of it traced back to a single family in a single wooden vessel. And at the heart of that family, a woman whose name appears for half a verse in the genealogy of Cain and is never explained. From such a small and silent seed, the tradition grew a tree that overshadowed the whole world, the grandmother of nations, the mother of the reborn humanity, the lovely one who rode out the end of the world and became the beginning of the next. This is the bright Naamah at her brightest, the grandmother of all nations, the second Eve, the mother of the reborn world. But we have lingered in the light long enough, for there was another Naamah as far from this one as the abyss is from the heavens. And to meet her, we must leave the bright slopes of the ark and descend into the shadows beneath the world. So far we have spoken of a woman, a human woman, daughter of Lamech, perhaps the wife of Noah, perhaps the mother of us all, a figure of flesh and history, however legendary. But there was a stream of tradition that took the name Naamah somewhere else entirely, down beneath the world of the living, into the realm of spirits and the demons of the night. And in that stream, Naamah was not a woman at all. She was one of the queens of the demons. To understand how this happened, we must first understand a strange and persistent feature of ancient Jewish thought. The world, as they conceived it, was not empty. The spaces between things, the darkness of night, the ruins of cities, the wastelands beyond the camp, all of these were inhabited by spirits, by unclean powers, by beings that the texts call mazikim, the harmful ones, and shedim, the demons. And these demons had origins. They were not eternal. They were made, or born, or generated at particular moments in the sacred history. And one of the most important of those moments, according to certain mystical traditions, was the very period we have been discussing, the generations before the flood, the days of Cain's line, the days of Naamah. Here the threads begin to weave together in a dark and intricate pattern. In the mystical tradition, 4 women came to be regarded as the great queens, or mothers, of the demonic world. 4 female powers who ruled over the unclean spirits and gave birth to legions of them. Their names were Lilith, the most famous, the night creature of ancient legend; Agrat, sometimes called the daughter of the demon king, Mahalath, associated with dancing and revelry; and Naamah, yes, the same name, Naamah. In the great Kabbalistic work known as the Zohar, composed and compiled in the medieval period, but drawing on far older traditions, Naamah appears as a powerful and dangerous spirit. She is described as a seductress, a being of extraordinary beauty who uses that beauty as a weapon. According to the Zohar, she goes out into the world and seduces men, and from these unions are born spirits and demons that trouble humanity. The Zohar connects her to the sons of God mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, the mysterious beings who, the text says, saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives. In the mystical reading, Naamah was among those who drew these heavenly beings down to earth. Her loveliness, the very loveliness encoded in her name, became the lure that pulled angels out of heaven and into corruption. And the offspring of that corruption helped to fill the earth with violence, the violence that would eventually summon the flood. Do you see the terrible symmetry? In the brighter tradition, Naamah is the woman who survives the flood and saves humanity. In the darker tradition, Naamah is one of the powers who helped cause the flood in the first place. The same name stands at both ends of the catastrophe, the one who brings the deluge and the one who outlives it, the destroyer and the deliverer. This is not a contradiction the ancient interpreters tried to resolve. Most of them never placed the two Naamahs side by side at all. The rabbis who made her Noah's wife were reading Genesis as history and lineage. The mystics who made her a queen of demons were reading the cosmos as a battleground of spiritual forces. They were asking different questions of the same name, and they received different answers. It is only when we, looking back across the centuries, lay the traditions next to each other that the strange double image appears. One woman, two destinies, pleasantness as salvation, pleasantness as ruin. Let us go deeper into the darker Naamah, for her story has layers that we have only begun to uncover. To understand the demonic Naamah, we must first understand her most famous companion. For Naamah rarely walks alone in the mystical texts. She walks beside Lilith. Lilith is a name that has traveled far beyond its origins. Today, she is invoked in art, in literature, in modern spirituality. But her roots reach back into the most ancient layers of Near Eastern belief, to Mesopotamian spirits of wind and night, and into Jewish tradition, where she became the night demon par excellence, the bringer of harm to mothers and infants, the seductress of sleeping men. The most famous story of Lilith comes from a medieval text known as the Alphabet of Ben Sira. It tells a startling tale. According to this text, before God created Eve from Adam's side, he first created a woman from the earth, just as he had created Adam from the earth. This first woman was Lilith, and because she was made from the same dust, from the same source as Adam, she considered herself his equal. She refused to be beneath him. When the argument could not be resolved, Lilith spoke the secret name of God, rose into the air, and fled the garden. God sent 3 angels to bring her back. They found her by the sea in a place of raging waters, already giving birth to demons by the 100. The angels commanded her to return. She refused, and a terrible bargain was struck. Lilith would not return to Adam. She would become a creature of the night, a power over the deaths of infants, and in exchange she would spare any child protected by the names of the 3 angels. This is the Lilith of legend, the first woman who would not submit, the mother of demons. And in the mystical tradition, she does not rule alone. Beside her stands Naamah. The Zohar and related Kabbalistic writings describe a kind of dark hierarchy, a shadow kingdom that mirrors the holy order of heaven. Just as there are holy powers above, there are unclean powers below. And among the unclean powers, certain female figures hold places of terrible authority. Lilith and Naamah are often paired as the 2 great seductresses, the 2 who go forth to ensnare the sons of men. In some traditions, the division of labor between them is described with chilling precision. The texts speak of how these spirits afflict humanity in the vulnerable hours, particularly in sleep, particularly in the night. They are associated with the nocturnal emissions of men, with the demons said to be generated from wasted seed, with the spirits that cluster around the unguarded soul in the darkness. Naamah, the lovely one, is imagined drifting through the world of dreams, beautiful beyond bearing, and from her seductions spring countless harmful spirits. It is worth pausing to understand what the ancient and medieval mind was doing here. This was not idle horror storytelling. These traditions were attempts to explain real and frightening features of human experience. Why do infants die in the night, suddenly, without apparent cause? Why are men troubled by dreams they cannot control? Why does desire so often lead to ruin? Why is beauty so dangerous? The figures of Lilith and Naamah gave shape to these terrors. They personified the parts of existence that felt invasive, uncontrollable, and dark. To name a fear is to gain a measure of power over it. And so the night demons were named, and the chief of them, the loveliest and among the most dangerous, bore the name of pleasantness, Naamah. The demonic Naamah is connected, in some traditions, to one of the most powerful figures in all of Jewish demonology. The demon king Asmodeus, appears by name in the book of Tobit, one of the texts found in the broader biblical tradition, included in the canon of some churches and treasured as historical literature by others. In Tobit, Asmodeus is a murderous spirit who has fallen in love with a young woman named Sarah, and out of jealous passion he kills each of the 7 men she marries, one after another, on their wedding nights, before they can come near her. He is a demon of lust and death intertwined, and he is finally driven away through the intervention of the angel Raphael. In later Jewish tradition, Asmodeus grows into a towering figure, a king among demons, sometimes depicted as ruling over the unclean spirits, much as a monarch rules a realm. And in some genealogies of the demonic world, Naamah is named as connected to his origins, whether as a mother figure or as a consort within the shadow kingdom. The exact relationships shift from text to text, for demonology was never a fixed science but a swirling, overlapping body of speculation. But the pattern is consistent. Naamah belongs to the royalty of the night. She is not a minor spirit. She is among the rulers. This royal status is part of what makes her so striking. In the mystical imagination, she is not simply a wandering ghost or a nameless terror. She is a queen. She has a domain. She generates offspring. She holds power, and her power flows precisely from the quality her name announces. Loveliness, pleasantness, beauty, the most disarming of all weapons. There is a profound psychological truth embedded in this image, and the ancients sensed it, even if they expressed it in the language of demons. The most dangerous temptations are not the ugly ones. We are well defended against what repels us. It is the lovely thing, the pleasant thing, the beautiful thing that slips past our guard. Naamah is the personification of seduction precisely because her name means pleasant. She represents the danger that does not look like danger, the ruin that arrives wearing the face of delight. In the fuller development of the mystical tradition, the 4 demon queens take on cosmic roles. They are not merely individual spirits, but principles woven into the structure of time and the world. The 4 are usually given as Lilith, Naamah, Agrat, and Mahalath. And in some Kabbalistic schemes, each is associated with a particular dimension of the demonic, a particular region or season or mode of affliction. They are imagined as ruling over vast hosts of spirits, each queen commanding her own legions. On certain nights of the year, the tradition holds, these queens and their hosts grow especially powerful, roaming the world with heightened force. This idea that there are times of the year, particular nights, when the boundary between the human world and the demonic world grows thin, is ancient and widespread. It appears in many cultures across the world, this sense that there are seasons when the dead walk and the spirits draw near. In the Jewish mystical tradition, it attached to figures like Agrat and Naamah, who were imagined leading their spectral armies across the sky in the deep hours of the night. To live in such a world was to live with a constant awareness of unseen powers. The pious response was vigilance. Prayers were recited for protection. The names of guardian angels were invoked. Amulets were inscribed and worn. Doorways were guarded with sacred words. The whole architecture of religious practice included a dimension of defense against the queens of the night, against Lilith and Naamah and their kind. And here we should be careful and honest. Not all of Judaism embraced this demonology. The tradition was vast, and it contained many voices. The great rationalist philosophers, the giants of medieval Jewish thought who sought to harmonize faith with reason, were often deeply skeptical of demons. To them, the unclean spirits of folklore were not literal beings, but expressions of moral and psychological truths, or simply popular superstitions to be gently set aside. The mystical and the rationalist streams of Judaism flowed side by side, sometimes in tension, sometimes in conversation, and a figure like the demonic Naamah lived primarily in the mystical stream, in the world of the Kabbalists and the folk traditions, rather than in the philosophical mainstream. So when we speak of Naamah, the demon queen, we are not describing an official doctrine. We are describing a powerful current within the river of tradition, a current that ran deep and dark and shaped the imaginations of countless generations, but that always coexisted with other ways of reading the world. Still, the current was real, and it was potent, and it carried the name Naamah down through the centuries, transforming the half-line of Genesis into one of the great female powers of the spiritual underworld. But we have not yet answered the deepest question. How did one name come to hold both meanings? How did the lovely sister of Tubal Cain become both the saintly mother of the human race and the demonic queen of the night? To answer this, we must look at the strange logic of the ancient interpreters, and at the moment in the biblical story where heaven itself came down to earth. To understand Naamah, the demon queen, fully, we must understand her great companion more deeply than we have so far. We must understand Lilith, for the two are bound together in the mystical imagination, and the story of Lilith illuminates the story of Naamah. The figure of Lilith is ancient beyond easy reckoning. Her roots reach back into Mesopotamian belief, into a class of wind spirits and night demons whose names echo across the cuneiform tablets of the oldest civilizations. A single, mysterious reference in the Hebrew scriptures, in the prophecies of Isaiah, names a night creature, a Lilith, that shall haunt the desolate places when judgment falls upon the land. It is a single word, a fleeting reference, much like Naamah herself, a name dropped into the text and left unexplained. And around that single word, as around the name of Naamah, an enormous tradition grew. The most developed and famous story comes, as we have seen, from the medieval text known as the Alphabet of Ben Sira. We should tell it more fully now, for it reveals the deep structure of the demonic feminine in Jewish tradition, the structure into which Naamah fits. According to this text, when God created the first human being, he created not one but two. He formed Adam from the dust of the earth, and he formed a woman also from the earth, also from the same dust. Her name was Lilith. They were equal in origin, made from the same source, and this equality became the source of the first conflict. For when they came together, Lilith would not accept a position beneath Adam. Why should she lie beneath him, she demanded, when they were made from the same earth, equal in their creation? Adam insisted on his superiority, Lilith insisted on her equality, and the conflict could not be resolved. Then Lilith did something extraordinary. She pronounced the secret name of God, the ineffable name, the name of power that the tradition holds in the deepest reverence. And by the power of that name, she rose into the air and flew away from the garden, abandoning Adam, abandoning Eden, fleeing into the wide world. God sent 3 angels after her. Their names are given as Senoi, Sansonoi, and Semangeloth, names that would later be inscribed on amulets to ward off her power. They found her by the Red Sea, in a region of fierce waters, a place associated with demons and danger. And already she had begun to give birth, bringing forth demons by the hundred, populating the world with spirits. The angels delivered God's command, return to Adam, or face consequences. And here the bargain was struck that would define Lilith forever. She refused to return. As punishment, the tradition holds 100 of her demon children would die each day. And in her grief and rage, Lilith became a destroyer of human infants, a danger to women in childbirth, a spirit of the night that preyed upon the vulnerable, But she granted one mercy. Wherever she saw the names or the images of the three angels, she would spare the child they protected. And so, for centuries, amulets bearing those angelic names were placed near mothers and newborns to guard against the night demon who had once been the first woman. This is the deep structure into which Naamah fits. Lilith is the woman who would not submit, who fled the order of creation, who became a power of the night and a mother of demons. And Naamah stands beside her, a second power of the same kind, a second seductress, a second mother of spirits. Where Lilith's defining act was rebellion against hierarchy, Naamah's defining quality is loveliness turned to seduction. Together they form a pair, the two great female powers of the demonic world, ruling the night and the dream, generating the spirits that afflict humankind. The mystical tradition did not leave these powers vague. It mapped them, ordered them, gave them domains and hierarchies, much as the holy tradition mapped the orders of angels and the architecture of heaven. For the Kabbalistic imagination, the unclean world was not chaos. It was a kingdom, dark and inverted, but ordered, the Sitra Achra, the other side, a shadow realm that mirrored the realm of holiness point for point. In this shadow kingdom, the four queens held their thrones, Lilith and Naamah, Agrat and Mahalath. Each commanded her legions, each had her sphere. And the tradition speaks of them with a kind of dreadful precision, naming the times of their power, the manner of their afflictions, the boundaries of their domains. There is a haunting image in the mystical texts of these queens going forth in the night, leading their hosts of spirits across the dark sky. Particular nights of the year, the tradition holds, belong to particular queens when their power swells and their armies ride. To be abroad on such a night, unprotected, was to risk encountering powers beyond human strength to resist. The pious took shelter in prayer, in the recitation of sacred words, in the invocation of the holy names that could hold the darkness at bay. And the afflictions of these queens were intimate. They came not in open battle but in the vulnerable hours, in sleep, in dream, in the unguarded moments of the soul. Naamah, in particular, the lovely one, was imagined as a spirit of seductive dreams, drifting through the sleep of men, beautiful beyond endurance, and from her phantom embraces, the tradition held, sprang further generations of spirits. The demonology connected her to the ancient and widespread anxiety about the loss of vital essence in sleep, about the dreams that the dreamer cannot control, about the strange and shameful experiences of the night. Naamah gave a face and a name to these mysteries. She was the beauty that visits in dreams and leaves corruption behind. We should pause here and acknowledge, with care and compassion, what these traditions were really grappling with. Behind the demonology lies a profound human discomfort with the uncontrollable dimensions of desire. The ancient and medieval mind, lacking our categories of psychology and biology, reached for the language of spirits to explain the parts of human sexuality that felt invasive, involuntary, or shameful. The night demon who seduces in dreams is, at one level, an attempt to externalize and explain experiences that the dreamer felt powerless over and ashamed of. To name a spirit as the cause was, in a sense, to relieve the self of a burden, to locate the disturbance outside the will. This does not make the traditions true in any literal sense, but it makes them deeply human. They are the products of people trying to understand themselves, trying to make sense of the strange and unruly aspects of their own inner lives, using the only language they had. And in Naamah, the lovely seductress of dreams, they gave that struggle a face of haunting beauty. She is, in a way, a mirror of the human encounter with desire itself, with all its danger and its shame and its inescapable power. We touched earlier on one of the most important ideas in ancient demonology, and we must now develop it, for it is the key that locks Naamah's two stories together. It is the teaching about where demons come from. The Book of Enoch and the traditions that flow from it offer a startling answer to the question of the origin of evil spirits. The demons, they teach, are the disembodied spirits of the dead giants, the Nephilim, the offspring of the union between the Watchers and the daughters of men. Follow the logic, for it is intricate and powerful. The Watchers were heavenly beings, spirits, immortal by nature. When they descended and took human wives, they produced hybrid offspring, the giants. These giants were a mixture of two natures, the heavenly spirit of their fathers and the earthly flesh of their mothers. They were, in a sense, beings that should not have existed, a violation of the boundary between heaven and earth, neither fully one thing nor the other. When the flood came, the bodies of the giants were destroyed. The earthly part of them, the flesh inherited from their human mothers, perished in the waters like all flesh. But the heavenly part, the spirit inherited from their angelic fathers, could not be destroyed by water. The spirit is not flesh. The flood could drown the body, but not the soul. And so, the tradition teaches, the spirits of the giants were released from their drowned bodies, and they remained upon the earth, homeless, restless, belonging neither to heaven, from which their fathers had fallen, nor to the realm of the human dead, for they were not fully human. They became the evil spirits, the demons, the unclean powers that wander the world to this day, seeking bodies to inhabit, seeking to afflict and to corrupt and to destroy. This is one of the most important teachings in all of ancient demonology, and its implications are vast. It means that the demons are not a separate creation, not beings made evil from the beginning. They are the tragic aftermath of the angelic descent. They are the orphaned spirits of a race that should never have been born, the lingering consequence of heaven's transgression against earth. Every demon, in this account, is a ghost of the antediluvian catastrophe, a fragment of the corruption that the flood was sent to cleanse but could not fully erase. Now bring Naamah into this picture, and the two stories fuse. The demons are the spirits of the dead giants. The giants were born from the Watchers and the daughters of men. Naamah, in the dark tradition, was among the women whose beauty drew the Watchers down. Her loveliness was a lure that helped to produce the very unions from which the giants came. And so the demons that haunt the world are, in a sense, her descendants, the spiritual offspring of the catastrophe she helped to set in motion. This is why she is called a mother of demons. Not because she gave birth to spirits directly, but because she stands at the source, among the women whose beauty brought down the angels, whose unions produced the giants, whose drowned spirits became the demons. She is the mother of the demonic world, by way of the whole tragic chain. And here the doubled story reaches its most exquisite tension. For the flood that drowned the giants and released their demon spirits is the same flood that the brighter tradition says Naamah survived. In the brighter reading, she rides above the waters in the ark, the saved mother of the human race. In the darker reading, she is woven into the cause of the catastrophe, and the death of the giants beneath those same waters is the birth of her demonic legacy. The same flood, the same name, salvation riding above the waters and the unleashing of demons beneath them. The two Naamahs, divided by the surface of a single sea. To understand how the Kabbalists could enthrone Naamah as a queen of the demonic world, we must enter, for a time, into the strange and intricate cosmology of Jewish mysticism. For the demonic Naamah is not a freestanding figure of folklore. She occupies a precise place in a vast architecture of the spiritual universe, and that architecture is one of the most remarkable productions of the medieval mind. The Kabbalists conceived of reality as flowing forth from the infinite and unknowable God through a series of emanations, channels of divine light and power, that structured all of existence. This was the realm of holiness, the world as it proceeds from God in order and radiance. But alongside this realm of holiness, the mystics perceived a shadow, a counter-realm, an inverted reflection of the holy order, composed not of light but of its absence, not of holiness but of impurity. They called it the Sitra Akra, the other side. The other side was not, in the most careful Kabbalistic thought, an independent power equal to God. The tradition was not dualistic in that sense. It did not imagine two equal gods, one good and one evil, locked in eternal combat. Rather, the other side was understood as a kind of parasite upon holiness, a shadow cast by the light, a realm that drew its very existence from the holy order. It inverted and opposed. It was real and it was dangerous, but it was secondary, derivative, a darkness that existed only because there was light to cast it. And the other side had its own structure, mirroring the structure of holiness. Just as the holy realm had its orders and hierarchies, its channels and powers, so the other side had its own dark hierarchy, its own rulers and legions. And among the rulers of the other side stood the demonic feminine powers, the queens of the night, including Lilith and Naamah. In this cosmology, the demonic queens are not random monsters. They are the shadow counterparts of holy realities. Where the holy realm has its sustaining and life-giving feminine aspect, the divine presence that the Kabbalists called by various sacred names, the other side has its devouring and corrupting feminine powers, the seductresses who drain life and spread impurity. Lilith and Naamah are, in this dark mirror, the inverted reflections of holiness, the shadow brides of the other side, drawing souls down into impurity as the holy presence draws souls up into sanctity. This is why the mystics could speak of Naamah with such seriousness. She was not a mere bogey to frighten children. She was a cosmic principle, a power woven into the very structure of the spiritual universe, the embodiment of the seductive impurity that shadows all holiness. Her loveliness was the loveliness of the other side, the dark beauty that mimics the true beauty of holiness in order to deceive and to capture. To encounter Naamah was to encounter the seductive power of the entire realm of impurity, concentrated into a single beautiful and terrible form. The Kabbalistic vision of the two realms, holiness and the other side, was not a static picture. It was a drama, a struggle, a war woven into the fabric of existence. And human beings, in this vision, were the crucial actors in that war. For the mystics taught that human actions had cosmic consequences. Every deed, every word, every thought either strengthened the realm of holiness or fed the other side. Righteousness, devotion, the fulfillment of the commandments, the turning of the heart toward God, these drew down divine light and strengthened the holy order. Sin, corruption, the turning of the heart toward impurity, these fed the other side, gave it power, extended its shadow over the world. The human soul was a battleground, and more than a battleground, a place of decision, where the balance between light and darkness was continually being struck. And in this war, the seductive powers of the other side, Lilith and Naamah, played a particular role. Their weapon was desire. Their strategy was seduction. They sought to draw the human soul through the lure of forbidden beauty and unholy pleasure away from holiness and into impurity. Every time a soul was captured by illicit desire, every time the heart turned from the higher beauty to the lower, the other side gained, and the queens of the night grew stronger. Naamah, the lovely one, was imagined as feeding upon precisely this, upon the wasted vitality, the misdirected desire, the loveliness turned toward the deep rather than toward heaven. There is, beneath the strange and sometimes lurid imagery, a profound moral and psychological vision here. The Kabbalists were saying something true about the human condition, even if they said it in the language of demons and cosmic realms. They were saying that desire is a battleground, that the longing for beauty and pleasure is a power that can flow in two directions, toward the holy or toward the corrupt, toward elevation or toward ruin. that the same energy of desire that can become the highest devotion can also become the deepest degradation, and that the choice between these, made and remade in countless small moments, has consequences that ripple out beyond the individual soul into the whole structure of the world. Naamah, in this vision, is the personification of desire turned toward the deep. She is what happens when loveliness is severed from holiness, when beauty becomes an end in itself, when the longing that should lift the soul toward God instead drags it down into impurity. She is not desire as such, for desire turned toward the holy is the engine of devotion and even of the divine union the mystics longed for. She is desire corrupted, beauty weaponized, loveliness made a snare. And she sits enthroned in the other side as the eternal reminder of how the highest things, when turned away from their proper end, become the lowest. But the Kabbalistic vision did not end in darkness. For if human actions could feed the other side and strengthen the queens of the night, they could also do the opposite. They could weaken the other side, diminish its power, and ultimately, the mystics hoped, bring about its final defeat and the repair of the broken world. This was the great hope of the Kabbalah, the tikkun, the repair, the mending of a cosmos that had fallen into fragmentation and shadow. Through righteousness, through devotion, through the turning of desire toward holiness rather than toward the deep, human beings could participate in the healing of the world. Every soul that turned its loveliness toward heaven, every desire redirected from the lower to the higher, weakened the other side and strengthened the realm of light. And in the fullness of time, the mystics believed the accumulated work of repair would bring about the final restoration. When the other side would be drained of its power, the queens of the night would lose their thrones, and the shadow would be reabsorbed into the light from which it had been cast. In this hope, even the dark Naamah has a place, and her story bends at the last toward light. For if Naamah is the personification of desire turned toward the deep, then the repair of the world is precisely the turning of that desire back toward heaven. The defeat of the demon queen is not her destruction by force, but the redemption of the very thing she embodies. When loveliness is restored to its proper end, when beauty is rejoined to holiness, when desire flows upward toward God rather than downward into impurity, then Naamah's power is broken, not by violence, but by the healing of the wound she represents. And here, astonishingly, the dark tradition and the bright tradition begin to reach toward each other across the great gulf that separates them. For the bright Naamah is loveliness turned toward heaven, the deeds pleasing to God, the beauty that saves and becomes the mother of the redeemed world. And the defeat of the dark Naamah is the redemption of loveliness, the turning of beauty back toward heaven, the very thing the bright Naamah embodies. In the end, the two Naamahs are perhaps not two beings at all, but two destinies of a single thing. Loveliness lost and loveliness redeemed, beauty fallen and beauty restored, the same name, at the bottom of its fall and at the height of its redemption. This is the deepest secret the doubled story holds. Naamah is not finally a woman, or a demon, or even two of them. She is loveliness itself, the pleasant thing, the beautiful gift, suspended between heaven and the abyss, capable of becoming either the mother of the saved world or the queen of the night, and called, in the end, to be redeemed, to be turned back toward the light from which all true beauty flows. Her two stories are the two possibilities of every beautiful thing, and of every human soul that carries beauty within it. And the whole long drama of her tradition, from the half-verse in Genesis to the cosmic visions of the Kabbalah, is finally a meditation on the redemption of loveliness, on the long journey of beauty from the deep back toward the light. To find the hinge on which the two Naamahs turn, we must go to one of the strangest passages in all of Scripture, 6 short verses at the opening of Genesis chapter 6. 6 verses that have generated more speculation, more controversy, and more sleepless wonder than almost any other passage in the ancient world. The text says this: "When men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took as their wives any they chose, the sons of God." In Hebrew, the B'nai Ha-Elohim. Who were they? For much of ancient Jewish tradition, and for many early Christian interpreters, the answer was clear and terrifying. The sons of God were angels, heavenly beings, members of the divine court, and in this passage they did the unthinkable. They looked down upon the daughters of the earth. They desired them, and they crossed the boundary that separated heaven from earth, spirit from flesh. The passage continues: "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown, giants, the offspring of the union between the heavenly beings and human women, in Hebrew, the Nephilim, the fallen ones, or the ones who cause others to fall. A race of beings that should never have existed, born from a crossing that should never have happened." And then, immediately after this passage, the text turns dark. God looks upon the earth and sees that the wickedness of man is great, that every intention of the human heart is only evil continually. And God resolves to blot out humanity from the face of the earth. The flood is coming. And it comes, in the text, directly on the heels of the descent of the sons of God and the birth of the giants. The ancient interpreters drew the connection without hesitation. The corruption of the world, the violence that filled the earth, the wickedness that summoned the flood, all of it was bound up with this catastrophic mingling of heaven and earth. The angels who fell, the women who drew them down, the monstrous children they produced, these were the engines of the world's ruin. And it is precisely here that the demonic Naamah finds her home. In the expanded traditions about the descent of the angels, preserved most famously in the ancient text known as the Book of Enoch, the story is told in vivid detail. The Book of Enoch was widely read in the centuries around the turn of the era. It was quoted in the New Testament. It was treasured by communities like the one at Qumran that preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it survives as scripture to this day in the Ethiopian church. It is not part of most biblical canons, but it shaped the imagination of the ancient world profoundly. In the Book of Enoch, the sons of God are called the Watchers. 200 of them descended, the text says, upon the heights of Mount Hermon. They were led by chiefs whose names have echoed through demonology ever since: Shemiaza, Azazel. They bound themselves with an oath to carry out their plan together. And they took wives from among the daughters of men. The consequences were catastrophic. The Watchers taught humanity forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught men to make swords and weapons and instruments of war. He taught women the secrets of cosmetics, of jewelry, of beautifying the eyes, the arts of allurement. Others taught sorcery, the cutting of roots, the reading of the stars, and the signs of the heavens. Knowledge that humanity was not meant to possess, poured down from heaven by beings who had abandoned their stations. And the giants were born. In Enoch's account, they were enormous, devouring, insatiable. They consumed the produce of the earth, then turned to consuming the animals, and at last turned to devouring humanity itself. The earth cried out under their violence, and the cry rose up to heaven, where the holy angels who had remained faithful, Michael and Gabriel and the others, heard it and brought it before the throne of God. And God resolved to cleanse the earth with water. Now, notice the threads that connect this story to Naamah. The descent of the Watchers was driven by desire. The angels saw that the women were beautiful, and they fell. Beauty was the trigger. Loveliness was the lure. And the secret arts that Azazel taught, the cosmetics and the ornaments and the allurements, were arts of enhancing beauty, of weaponizing it, of using loveliness to capture and ensnare. In this light, a woman named Loveliness, a woman named Naamah, living in exactly this period, in exactly the generations when the Watchers came down, takes on a sinister significance. The mystical tradition placed her here, among the women whose beauty drew the angels from heaven. She became, in the dark reading, a kind of archetype of the seductive power that brought about the fall. Not merely a woman who was seduced, but a woman whose beauty did the seducing. And from such unions, the tradition held, came not only the giants, but the spirits, the demons, the unclean powers that would haunt the world even after the flood had washed the giants away. For here is a crucial piece of the ancient demonology. When the giants died, the tradition asks, where did their spirits go? They were hybrid beings, part heavenly and part earthly. Their bodies could be destroyed by the flood, but their spirits, the heavenly part, could not so easily be erased. And so, the Book of Enoch teaches, the spirits of the dead giants became the evil spirits that roam the earth. The demons that afflict humanity are, in this account, the ghosts of the Nephilim. Disembodied, restless, hungry, they wander the world seeking to harm and to possess. This is the bridge between the two Naamahs. If Naamah was among the women whose beauty drew down the Watchers, then she stands at the very source of the demonic world. The demons are the spirits of the giants. The giants were born from the union of angels and women, and Naamah, the lovely one, was among those women. She is thus woven into the origin of every evil spirit that troubles humankind. The mother of demons, not by giving birth to them directly, but by standing at the headwaters of the catastrophe from which they flowed. And yet, and this is the wonder of it, the very same period, the very same name, produced the opposite story. For if some women drew the angels down to ruin, the tradition of Noah's wife insists that one woman, bearing this same name, was preserved through the very flood that the catastrophe summoned. The beauty that destroyed and the beauty that survived. The loveliness that helped bring the deluge and the loveliness that outlived it in the ark. Naamah at the bottom of the catastrophe and Naamah riding above it on the waters. How could the ancient interpreters hold both of these? How could the same name carry salvation and damnation? The answer lies in understanding how these interpreters worked and what they believed about the hidden structure of the world. They believed, first of all, that nothing in Scripture was accidental. A name preserved in silence demanded explanation, and where the text was silent, the interpreter was free, even obligated, to fill the gap. But the gap could be filled in more than one way. Different interpreters, working in different centuries with different concerns, filled the same silence differently. The rabbi, reading Genesis as a record of the generations, wanted to know who the mother of humanity was, and he answered, Naamah. The mystic, reading the cosmos as a war of light and darkness, wanted to know where the demon queens came from, and he answered, Naamah. Neither was consulting the other. Each was answering his own question from the same fertile silence. But there is something deeper still. The mystical tradition, especially the Kabbalah, was profoundly comfortable with the idea that opposites are bound together. That light and darkness are not simply enemies but reflections. That for every holy power above, there is an unclean shadow below. The Kabbalists spoke of the Sitra Achra, the other side, a whole realm of impurity that mirrored the realm of holiness. In such a system, it is not strange, but expected that a single name might bear a holy meaning and an unholy one. The pleasant that pleases God and the pleasant that pleases the deep are two faces of the same word, and the word holds them both. In this way, Naamah becomes more than a forgotten woman. She becomes a kind of meditation on the doubleness of beauty itself. Loveliness can lift the soul toward heaven, as the beauty of holiness draws the worshipper upward. Or loveliness can drag the soul down toward the abyss, as the beauty of temptation pulls the heart away from God. The same quality, the same gift, the same name, used toward light, it saves. Used toward darkness, it destroys. And the ancient mind, contemplating the single Hebrew word name, pleasant, saw both possibilities folded into it, and gave them both a face, and called that face Naamah. This is the genius of the tradition, and its strange beauty. It refused to let beauty be simple. It refused to let a name be merely a name. And from 5 quiet words in Genesis, it built a figure who contains within herself the whole drama of the human soul, suspended between the ark and the abyss, between the loveliness that saves and the loveliness that ruins. We have reached the heart of the mystery, but the story does not end with the doubled name, for Naamah did not stay in the ancient world. She traveled through the centuries, through the texts, through the imaginations of mystics and poets. She continued to grow, and to follow her there is to watch a single forgotten woman become an enduring figure in the spiritual imagination of the West. We have spoken of the knowledge that the Watchers brought down to humanity, the forbidden curriculum taught by the fallen angels. But the ancient texts are remarkably specific about this knowledge, and the specifics matter for understanding Naamah, for they reveal exactly how beauty and corruption were intertwined in the ancient imagination. The Book of Enoch names the teachers and their subjects with care. The chief of the descending angels in one strand of the tradition is Azazel, and his teaching is dark indeed. He taught men, the text says, to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, the instruments of war. He revealed the working of metals, the craft of fashioning weapons, the technology of killing. And here we hear an echo of Tubal Cain, the metalworker of Cain's line, Naamah's own brother. The forbidden knowledge of the angels and the inventions of Cain's household run along the same lines, the working of metal, the forging of blades. The traditions seem to braid together, the human inventors and the angelic instructors, both bringing the same dangerous mastery into the world. But Azazel taught more than weapons. He taught, the text continues, the arts of adornment and allurement. He showed women how to beautify their eyelids, how to use cosmetics, how to fashion ornaments and jewelry, how to enhance their beauty and make themselves alluring. In the moral logic of the text, this is not a neutral cosmetic tip. It is the weaponizing of beauty. It is the teaching of seduction as an art, the transformation of natural loveliness into a deliberate snare. And the result, the text laments, was great corruption, as men were led astray and the world filled with fornication and godlessness. Do you see how perfectly Naamah fits this pattern? Her name means lovely, pleasant, beautiful. The dark tradition makes her a seductress, and the forbidden knowledge that the Watchers brought includes precisely the arts of seductive beauty, the cosmetics and ornaments and allurements that turn loveliness into a weapon. Naamah, in the dark reading, is the human embodiment of Azazel's curriculum, the woman who masters the forbidden art of allurement and uses her God-given loveliness as the fallen angels taught, to ensnare and to corrupt. Other angels in the tradition taught other forbidden arts. One taught the cutting of roots and the uses of plants, the knowledge of potions and poisons and the secret properties of growing things. Others taught the reading of the stars, astrology, the interpretation of the signs of the heavens, the casting of fortunes. Still others taught enchantments, spells, the binding and loosing of spiritual powers, the whole apparatus of sorcery. Knowledge of the clouds, knowledge of the earth, knowledge of the moon and its courses, all of it poured down from heaven into the hands of a humanity not ready to bear it. The ancient mind understood something profound here, something we would do well to remember in our own age of accelerating knowledge. Not all knowledge is good to have, or rather, knowledge outpacing wisdom is a catastrophe. The Watchers gave humanity power without giving it the maturity to wield that power rightly. They taught the forging of swords to a species that had already committed murder. They taught the arts of seduction to a world already inclined to corruption. They taught the manipulation of spiritual forces to people who could not control even their own hearts. And the result was not enlightenment, but ruin. The forbidden knowledge did not lift humanity up. It dragged the world down toward the flood. There is a warning in this for every age, and perhaps especially for ours. We, too, accumulate knowledge and power at a breathless pace. We, too, gain capabilities that our wisdom has not caught up to. The ancient story of the Watchers asks a question that never grows old. What happens when a species gains powers it is not ready to wield? The antediluvian world, in the imagination of the ancient texts, is the answer. And Naamah, the lovely one who mastered the forbidden art of allurement, stands within that answer as a figure of beauty turned to a power too dangerous to hold. The tradition even gives us a place, a specific geography for the angelic descent, and it is worth visiting, for it grounds the cosmic story in the solid earth. According to the Book of Enoch, the Watchers descended upon the summit of Mount Hermon. Hermon is a real mountain, the highest peak in the region of ancient Israel and its neighbors, a great snow-capped massif at the northern edge of the land, its slopes feeding the headwaters of the Jordan. To this day it stands, vast and cold, its heights white for much of the year, a natural throne dominating the northern horizon. The tradition holds that the 200 Watchers, before they descended, gathered upon this height and bound themselves with a mutual oath. They swore together to carry out their plan, to descend and take wives from among the daughters of men, and they bound one another by the oath, so that none could later draw back and leave the others to bear the blame alone. The text even offers a kind of folk etymology, connecting the name Hermon to the Hebrew root for a curse or an oath, the herem, the binding vow, the mountain of the oath, the place where heaven swore to abandon heaven. There is something powerful in this grounding of the cosmic drama upon a real mountain. The ancient hearers knew Hermon. They could lift their eyes to the north and see its white heights, and to know that this familiar peak was, in the tradition, the very place where the angels fell, where heaven touched earth in transgression, where the catastrophe began, must have lent the whole story an immediacy that we can barely recover. The corruption of the world did not begin in some far-off mythical realm. It began on a mountain they could see, and from that mountain the consequences spread. The Watchers descended to the daughters of men. The giants were born. The forbidden knowledge spread through the world, and among the daughters of men, in the dark tradition, was Naamah, the lovely one. Her beauty among the lures that drew the swearing angels down from the heights of Hermon into the ruin of the world. The mountain of the oath stands, in this reading, at the very headwaters of her dark legacy, the place where the chain began that would lead through the giants and the flood to the demons of the night and the queen who rules them. We have followed the dark tradition deep into its shadows, and we have followed the bright tradition up into the ark. But honesty and balance require that we now hear another voice, a voice that ran counter to all of this, a voice of doubt and reason that flowed through Jewish tradition alongside the mystical streams. For not everyone believed in demon queens, not everyone accepted the descent of the Watchers as literal history, or the existence of seductive spirits in the night, or the whole apparatus of demonology that placed Naamah upon a throne of shadow. The tradition of Jewish thought was vast and various, and it contained powerful currents of rationalism and skepticism that approached these stories very differently. The great philosophers of medieval Judaism, the thinkers who labored to harmonize the faith of their fathers with the rigorous reasoning of philosophy, were often deeply uncomfortable with the world of demons and spirits. To the most rigorous of these minds, the universe was governed by reason and law, by the wisdom of the Creator expressed in the orderly working of nature. Demons that seduce in dreams, queens of the night leading spectral armies across the sky, the spirits of drowned giants haunting the earth, all of this struck them as the stuff of folklore and superstition, unworthy of the dignity of true religion. Some of these thinkers reinterpreted the demonic traditions allegorically. The demons, they suggested, were not literal beings, but representations of the lower impulses of the human soul, the appetites and passions that war against reason and against the higher self. In this reading, Naamah, the seductress, is not a spirit in the night, but a symbol of the seductive power of desire within each of us, the loveliness of temptation that draws the soul away from its proper good. The battle against the demon queen becomes the inner battle against one's own lower nature, the struggle to turn one's loveliness, one's vital energy, toward the higher rather than the lower. Others simply set the demonic traditions aside as popular belief that the educated need not share. They focused instead on the ethical and legal and philosophical substance of the tradition, the commandments, the pursuit of justice, the cultivation of virtue, the contemplation of the divine. The night demons belonged, for them, to the realm of the common folk and their fears, not to the high tradition of reasoned faith. This rationalist current is important for us to hold, for it keeps us honest. When we speak of Naamah, the demon queen, we are not describing a belief that all of Judaism held, or even that the most authoritative voices held. We are describing one powerful stream within a vast and contested tradition, a stream that flowed strong in the mystical and folk currents, but that was questioned, allegorized, or dismissed by the rationalists. The truth of the tradition is not that everyone believed in the demonic Naamah. The truth is that the tradition was large enough to hold both the mystics who enthroned her and the philosophers who explained her away, and that the conversation between them ran for centuries. And perhaps the rationalist reading and the mystical reading are not as far apart as they first appear. For if the demon queen Naamah is, at one level, a symbol of the seductive power of desire within the human soul, then the mystics and the philosophers were pointing, by different paths, at the same truth. Beauty is dangerous. Desire can ensnare. The loveliness within us and around us can lift us toward heaven or drag us toward the deep. Whether we call that danger a demon queen riding the night sky or a lower impulse warring against reason, the warning is the same. And Naamah, the lovely one, stands as its emblem either way. Let us return now to the great catastrophe itself. For whichever Naamah we follow, the saint or the seductress, both of their stories converge upon a single overwhelming event, the flood, the unmaking of the world. And to understand Naamah, we must stand with her at the edge of that deluge and watch the waters come. Imagine the world in its final days before the flood. The corruption had spread to every corner. The giants walked the earth, the offspring of the fallen watchers, and the violence they brought had soaked into the soil. The forbidden knowledge had spread. Weapons gleamed in the hands of men who had learned to forge them. The arts of allurement and sorcery and divination had filled the cities. The earth itself, the ancient texts say, had grown corrupt, its very ground defiled by blood. And the cry of the suffering rose up day and night to heaven. And heaven listened, and heaven answered. But before the answer came, there was a stillness. The ancient imagination dwells on this moment, the moment before the breaking. Picture the sky in the days when Noah and his household entered the ark. The animals had come, 2 by 2 and 7 by 7, drawn by some power they did not understand, filing into the great wooden vessel that Noah had labored over for so long, while his neighbors mocked. The door was shut. Scripture says something remarkable here. It says that the Lord shut him in. The hand that closed the door was not human, and then nothing happened. For 7 days, the tradition holds, nothing happened. The ark sat upon the dry ground. The sky was clear. The mockers, perhaps, mocked all the louder. And inside the ark, in the close darkness, 8 souls waited. Noah, his 3 sons, and the 4 women. Among them, if the brighter tradition is true, Naamah, the lovely one from the line of Cain, now sealed inside the vessel of salvation, waiting in the dark for the world to end. Can you feel the weight of that waiting, the held breath of the world, the last stillness before the unmaking? And then it began. The text describes it with a strange and specific power. On that day, it says, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the windows of heaven were opened. Notice the two directions. The waters came from below and from above. From the great deep, the primordial waters that the ancient cosmology placed beneath the earth, the same waters that God had separated and held back at the very creation of the world. And from above, through the windows of heaven, the waters that had been held back behind the firmament, the great dome of the sky. This is the key to understanding what the flood meant to the ancient mind. It was not merely a heavy rain, it was the undoing of creation itself. At the beginning, in the first chapter of Genesis, God had taken the formless waters of chaos and divided them. He had set a boundary, the firmament, to hold back the waters above. He had gathered the waters below into the seas and let the dry land appear. Creation was, at its heart, an act of separation, of holding chaos at bay, of carving out a space of order in the midst of the deep. And now, in the flood, those separations were being undone. The boundaries were dissolving. The waters above and the waters below were rushing back to meet each other, to reclaim the space that order had stolen from them. The world was returning to the chaos from which it had been called. The air grew heavy. The first drops fell, and then the heavens broke. The fountains of the deep did not trickle, they burst. Imagine the ground splitting, the earth itself cracking open, and from those wounds the dark primordial waters surging upward with a force that had been held back since the dawn of time. And above, the dome of the sky gave way, and the waters that had hung suspended since the second day of creation came down, not as rain, but as a falling sea. The two waters rushed toward each other, above and below, and between them the world of the living was caught and crushed. Now the ancient texts and the imagination they kindle linger on the dying world, and we must linger too, for this is the heart of the catastrophe. The waters rose, and they did not stop. First the low places, the valleys filled, the rivers, swollen beyond their banks, swallowed the fields, the cities of the plain, the cities that Cain's line had built, the cities full of music and weapons and the arts of seduction, felt the water lapping at their gates. And the people fled to higher ground. They climbed the hills, and the waters followed. They climbed the mountains, and still the waters followed. The giants, the mighty men of renown, the towering offspring of the Watchers, found that their strength availed them nothing now. No weapon could be forged against water. No height of stature could outlast a sea that climbed past the mountain tops. The texts and traditions imagine their terror. These beings who had devoured the earth, now scrambling for the highest peaks, now clinging to the last summits, now overwhelmed. The mighty drowned alongside the weak, the proud sank beside the humble. The waters did not distinguish, they covered all. And here the tradition turns to a sorrow that is almost unbearable. For not all who drowned were monsters. There were the ordinary dead, the mothers who held their children up out of the water until their arms failed. The old who could not climb. The animals that had not been chosen, the wild things of the field, fleeing and swimming, and at last slipping beneath the surface. The whole teeming life of the world, the life that God had called good on the days of creation, was being unmade. The birds were the last to go. The texts imagine them circling above the rising water, searching for a place to land, finding none. The trees were gone, swallowed. The mountaintops were gone. There was nothing left but the grey, heaving surface of the deep and the single dark shape of the ark riding upon it. And one by one, the birds, exhausted, their wings soaked and heavy, fell from the sky into the water. And then there was no living thing upon the face of the earth, save what rode within the wooden vessel. The silence that followed must have been the loudest silence in the history of the world. Inside the ark, the 8 survivors heard it. The roar of the waters had been deafening, and then, as the last of the world sank away, the roar gave way to the long groan of the vessel on the swells, the creak of timber, the slap of water against wood, and beneath that, nothing. No birdsong, no voices, no life. The entire chorus of creation had fallen silent in a single day. Picture Naamah in that darkness, if she was there. The lovely one, the woman whose name meant pleasant, sealed inside the ark while the world she had known dissolved. Her father, Lamech, gone. Her brothers, Jabal and Jubal and Tubal-Cain, the great inventors, the fathers of herding and music and metalwork, gone. The cities, the songs, the forges, all of it gone beneath the water. Everything she had ever known, erased. And she alone of all her family, perhaps preserved, carried forward into a world washed, clean and emptied, to become the mother of whatever would come next. What does a soul feel, riding above the grave of the entire world? The tradition does not tell us, but we can imagine the grief of it, the unbearable solitude, to be among the only living things in a drowned creation, to know that everything behind you is gone and everything before you is unknown. The brighter Naamah, the saint, would have carried that weight, the mother of the new world, holding within her the memory of the old. And if instead we follow the darker tradition, the picture inverts but does not soften. For in that reading, the catastrophe was in part her doing. The beauty that drew the watchers down had helped to fill the earth with the corruption that summoned the waters. And now the waters had come, and the giants she had helped to bring into being were drowning, and their spirits were rising from their broken bodies to begin their long, restless haunting of the world. In that reading, the flood is not Naamah's salvation, but the unleashing of her true and terrible legacy. The death of the giants is the birth of the demons, and Naamah, the demon queen, steps forth into the cleansed world, not as its mother, but as its tormentor, leading the spirits of the drowned giants out into the empty earth. 2 readings, 2 Naamahs, the same grey sea, the same drowned world, the same dark ark riding above the deep. And at the center of it, one name, suspended between salvation and ruin, riding out the end of the world. For 150 days, the texts say, the waters prevailed upon the earth, and then God remembered Noah. That is the phrase Scripture uses. God remembered, not that God had forgotten, but that the moment of turning had come. And God sent a wind over the earth, and the waters began to subside. The fountains of the deep were closed, the windows of heaven were shut, the rain ceased, and slowly, slowly, the grey sea began to fall. The ark came to rest at last upon the mountains, and Noah waited. He sent out a raven, which flew to and fro. He sent out a dove, which found no place to rest, and returned. He waited, and sent the dove again, and this time it returned with an olive leaf in its beak, a green and living thing, the first sign that the world was being reborn. And he waited still, and sent the dove a 3rd time, and it did not return, for it had found a home in the renewed earth. The ancient interpreters lingered tenderly over these birds, and we may linger too, for they carry meaning. The raven, the dark bird, the bird that feeds on death, went forth and did not return, content to feed upon the floating corpses of the drowned world, a creature still bound to the old order of death. But the dove, the gentle bird, the bird of peace, could find no rest in a world of death, and returned to the ark, to the vessel of life. Only when life had begun again, when the olive leaf budded, could the dove find a place. And the olive branch in the dove's beak became, for all the ages that followed, the very emblem of peace, of reconciliation, of the storm past and the calm returned. From the deck of the ark, perhaps, the four women watched these birds go forth and return, reading in their flight the slow news that the world was being made new. And then the door opened, and the 8 survivors stepped out onto a washed and silent world. The mud of the receding waters, the strange light of a sky that had wept itself empty, the smell of a world made new. And upon them rested the whole future of humanity. The first act of the new world, Scripture records, was worship. Noah built an altar and offered thanks to the God who had carried them through. And God responded with a promise, the first covenant of the renewed earth, sealed with a sign hung in the sky, the rainbow. Never again, God promised, would the waters destroy all flesh. And whenever the rains came and the bow appeared in the clouds, it would be a reminder of that promise, a sign of mercy arching over a world that had known judgment. If Naamah stood among them in that moment, then she saw the first rainbow, the bow of peace stretched across the washed sky, the promise that the waters would never again rise to swallow the world. The lovely one who had ridden out the end of all things, standing now beneath the sign of mercy at the dawn of the world to come. If Naamah was among them, then in that moment she became the mother of us all. The lovely one from the line of Cain, stepping out of the ark onto the cleansed earth, carrying the future of the human race in her line. Every nation that would ever rise, every people across every continent, the children of Naamah and her sons. And so the catastrophe that ended one world became the threshold of another. The waters that unmade creation gave way to a new creation. And the name Naamah, whether we read it as saint or seductress, stands at the very pivot of that turning, at the place where the old world dies and the new world is born. But the story of Naamah did not end on the slopes of the mountain where the ark came to rest. Her name would travel on, down through the centuries, into the texts and traditions of ages she would never see. And it is to that long afterlife that we now turn. A name dropped into Scripture and left unexplained does not stay buried, it waits. And across the centuries, generation after generation of readers returned to Genesis chapter 4, verse 22, and found Naamah waiting there, and asked again the question that the text would not answer. Who was she? In the early centuries, the rabbis who composed the great body of interpretation known as the Midrash debated her vigorously. We have already heard their voices. Some made her the wife of Noah, the mother of the saved world, praised for deeds pleasing to God. Others made her a singer of seductive songs to idols, a temptress of the old world. The debate was never settled, and that was the way of rabbinic interpretation. It preserved the disagreement. It held the possibilities in tension, side by side, letting the reader sit with the mystery rather than forcing a resolution. Then came the mystics. In the medieval period, the great flowering of Jewish mysticism known as the Kabbalah took up the figure of Naamah and gave her a place in a vast and intricate cosmic system. The central text of this tradition, the Zohar, the Book of Radiance, wove Naamah into its dark tapestry of the other side, the realm of unclean powers that shadowed the realm of holiness. Here, Naamah became fully the demon queen, the seductress of the night, the companion of Lilith, the mother of harmful spirits. The Zohar and the texts that grew around it developed her demonic identity in elaborate detail, fixing her place among the 4 queens of the unclean world, connecting her to the fallen angels and the spirits of the dead giants. It is one of the great ironies of tradition that the same centuries which could imagine Naamah as the saintly mother of humanity could also imagine her as the queen of demons. The two streams flowed side by side, the legal and narrative tradition of the rabbis and the mystical tradition of the Kabbalists. And Naamah lived a double life between them. To the one, she was a woman of history and lineage. To the other, she was a power of the cosmic night, and no one, for the most part, felt compelled to choose. The traditions simply coexisted, two portraits of a single name, hanging in different rooms of the same vast house. From the Kabbalah, the demonic Naamah passed into the broader stream of Jewish folklore and, eventually, into the wider Western imagination. The figures of Lilith and her companions proved irresistible to later writers, artists, and seekers. In the modern age, as interest in mythology and the occult and the buried feminine figures of ancient religion has grown, Naamah has been rediscovered again and again. She appears in works of fiction, in art, in modern esoteric traditions, sometimes as a dark goddess, sometimes as a symbol of feminine power that orthodoxy tried to suppress, sometimes as a figure of healing or wisdom reclaimed from the shadows. It is worth being clear and careful here. Many of these modern interpretations move far beyond anything found in the ancient sources. They reflect the concerns and longings of our own age more than the beliefs of the rabbis or the Kabbalists. The ancient Naamah, whether saint or demon, was a figure of awe and often of fear. The modern Naamah is often a figure of fascination and recovery, a name lifted out of the old texts and given new meanings. This is the way of all enduring symbols. They do not stay fixed. Each age reshapes them in its own image. And so, the woman of half a verse continues to grow, gathering new meanings as she travels through time, even as the original silence of the text remains exactly as silent as it ever was. Let us step back now and consider what this strange double story can teach us. For Naamah is more than a curiosity, more than a footnote in the genealogies. She is a window into how human beings make meaning and into the mystery of beauty itself. Consider first the silence. The Bible gives us a name and almost nothing else. To the modern mind, this can feel like a frustration, an absence, a gap to be filled with historical research or simply set aside. But to the ancient interpreters, the silence was not empty. It was full. It was an invitation. The text, they believed, was deliberately spare, deliberately economical, precisely so that the reader would have to lean in, to wonder, to dig. The silences of Scripture were not failures of the text. They were rooms left open for the reader to enter. And what the interpreters found when they entered the room of Naamah's name was not a single answer, but a mirror. They brought their own questions, their own fears, their own hopes, and the name reflected them back. Those who hoped to find goodness, even in the cursed line of Cain, found a saint. Those who sought to understand the origins of evil and the dangers of desire found a demon. The name did not change. The readers changed. And Naamah became, in a sense, a measure of the soul of whoever contemplated her. Consider, too, what her doubled story says about beauty. Her name means pleasant, lovely, sweet, and the tradition could not decide whether that loveliness was a blessing or a curse. This was not confusion, it was wisdom, for beauty truly is doubled. The same loveliness that can lift the heart toward heaven, that can move us to tears before a sunset or a symphony or a beloved face, can also ensnare and destroy. Desire can be the engine of devotion or the engine of ruin. The ancient mind, contemplating the single word name, refused to pretend that beauty was simple or safe. It gave beauty two faces, the ark and the abyss, the saint and the seductress, and insisted that we hold them both. There is a kind of honesty in this that our own age sometimes lacks. We are tempted to make beauty either trivial or pure, either a mere decoration or an unmixed good. The tradition of Naamah will not let us. It reminds us that the most powerful and pleasant things in life are precisely the most dangerous, that what disarms us can save us or undo us, and that the difference lies not in the beauty itself, but in what it is turned toward. Loveliness aimed at heaven becomes a ladder. Loveliness aimed at the deep becomes a snare. The same gift, the same name, two destinies, And consider, finally, what it means that one woman could be imagined as both the mother of all the living and the queen of the dead. We tend to want our figures simple. The good are good, and the wicked are wicked, and never the two shall meet. But the tradition of Naamah suggests something truer and harder, that the line between salvation and ruin runs not between people but through them, that the same name, the same soul, the same beauty holds within it both possibilities. We are all, in some measure, both Naamahs. We all carry within us the loveliness that could save and the loveliness that could destroy. And the whole drama of a human life is the long question of which way we will turn that gift. So who was Naamah? The honest answer is that we do not know. We will never know. The Bible has given us 5 words and then closed the door. She was the sister of Tubal-Cain. She bore a name that meant pleasant, and beyond that, all is silence and tradition and the long work of the human imagination filling the gap. But perhaps that is the most fitting answer of all. For Naamah, more than almost any other figure in the ancient texts, is a creature of the threshold. She stands at the boundary between the named and the unnamed, between history and legend, between the woman of flesh and the power of the night. She stands at the boundary between the old world and the new, riding out the flood on the dark waters, the last daughter of a drowned age and the first mother of an age to come. And she stands at the boundary within the human soul itself, between the beauty that lifts and the beauty that ruins, between the ark and the abyss. She is the woman in the doorway, half in the light, half in the shadow, named but unexplained, remembered but unknown. And in that very incompleteness, she has become one of the most haunting figures the ancient imagination ever produced. Not because we know so much about her, but because we know so little, and because that little has proven so fertile, so endlessly open to wonder. A single name in a single verse, in the line of the first murderer. And from it, 2,000 years of saints and demons, of mothers and queens, of salvation and ruin. The loveliness that survived the flood, and the loveliness that helped to bring it. The grandmother of the human race, and the mother of the spirits of the night. Both born from 5 quiet words that the text left, deliberately unexplained. As the night settles around you now, and the day releases its hold, consider the strange gift of the silences. Consider how much can grow from how little. Consider how a single forgotten name, preserved without explanation in the oldest of texts, could become a mirror in which generations saw their deepest hopes and their oldest fears. The ancients believed that nothing in those texts was wasted, that every name was a seed, and that the patient reader, leaning into the silence, would find worlds. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps the silences are where the deepest meanings hide, waiting for us to grow quiet enough to hear them. And perhaps, too, there is comfort in the doubled story of Naamah, even now. For if a single name could hold both the saint and the seductress, both the mother of the living and the queen of the night, then perhaps the soul itself is more spacious than we feared, and the line between our light and our shadow is not a wall but a path. One we walk every day, turning our loveliness now toward heaven, now toward the deep, and choosing, again and again, which Naamah we will be. So rest now. Let the questions remain open, as the ancients left them, unhurried and unresolved. Let the name Naamah, the pleasant one, settle gently in your mind as the lamps go down. The woman in the doorway, the loveliness that rode out the end of the world, half in light, half in shadow, and lovely in both. The old texts are closing, the silence is returning, the same rich silence from which she came. And somewhere in that silence, the woman in the line of Cain is still riding above the waters, still standing at the threshold, still holding within her single name all the beauty and all the danger of the human heart. Sleep well, and may your own loveliness, whatever form it takes, be turned always toward the light.